It was a cold and foggy morning when my life began to change in a strange way. I inherited my grandfather's farm, a remote and isolated place where he had spent his last days. I was never very connected to the countryside, but the idea of a fresh start appealed to me. The property had a rustic beauty, except for the old barn, a structure that seemed straight out of a horror story. On the very first day, I noticed something unusual. Crows. There was a group of them perched on the barn's roof, and their number seemed to increase every day. The barn, already gloomy by nature, became even more sinister with the crows cawing incessantly. I tried to scare them away, but they always came back, as if guarding something. There were many of them, and their black eyes seemed to watch my every move, as if I were an intruder on my own land. It was on one of those nights while I was sitting on the porch that I met a figure who would change everything. A man dressed in black emerged from the fog, his presence both elegant and threatening. He introduced himself as Victor. He said he was a friend of my grandfather's and had come to offer help. I found it strange because I had never heard of him. Victor had a strange aura, something I couldn't immediately identify, but it caused me inexplicable discomfort. We talked for a long time, and Victor spoke about the history of the farm and how it had been a prosperous meeting point in the past. He had a persuasive way of speaking, and before I knew it, he was offering me a deal. A tempting proposal that would bring the farm back to prosperity in exchange for a small ritual. Reluctant but drawn by the idea of easy success, I accepted. He explained that the ritual would be something I would hardly notice, a minimal price compared to the benefits I would receive. Since then, strange things began to happen. Animals disappeared, shadows moved on their own, and the crows multiplied, becoming a constant and oppressive presence. The farm began to prosper, but at the cost of an increasing sense of dread. It was as if a shadow hung over the place, something visitors also noticed, although they didn't say anything directly. It was on a full moon night that everything was revealed. I woke up to a deafening noise. Crows. When I went out to investigate, I found Victor near the barn, murmuring incomprehensible words. As I approached, he turned, his eyes glowing a deep red. I then understood the pact I had made. Victor was not human. He was the devil himself. He laughed at my horrified expression and told me the truth about my grandfather. My grandfather had also made a pact, but when he tried to undo it, he was condemned. The crows were the souls of those who had fallen into the same trap. Victor showed me the contract I had signed, written in my own blood. My fate was sealed. With each word he spoke, I felt the weight of my decision crushing my soul. There was no easy way out. Desperate, I ran to the barn, believing I could find a way to reverse the pact. Inside, a terrifying sight awaited me. My grandfather's body, preserved as if time had not passed, holding a spell book. I understood that he was trying to save his soul when he died. The barn, already frightening, became a nightmare scene with that discovery. The air was dense, heavy with the presence of forces beyond my comprehension. As I picked up the book, the crows invaded the barn, attacking me furiously. I struggled to read the pages, my hands trembling. Finally, I found the spell that could free the souls, but it required a final ritual, my own life. The words in the book glowed strangely, as if the paper itself were alive. Each syllable seemed to pull a part of me. With no options, I recited the words. I felt excruciating pain as my life ebbed away. The crows suddenly stopped, and one by one began to disappear. Victor appeared again, this time with a look of defeat. "You may have saved the others, but your soul is mine," he said, before disappearing into the fog. The pain I felt was indescribable, but at the same time there was a strange peace, as if I had done something right, even at the cost of my own life. However, as the fog lifted and the first rays of dawn broke, something miraculous happened. I found myself still alive, lying on the barn floor. The marks of the ritual were gone, and the oppressive presence had lifted. The barn, which once seemed a place of doom, now felt serene. My grandfather's body had disappeared, but the spell book remained, its pages blank, as if the magic had been spent. I stepped outside to see the farm bathed in morning light. The crows were gone, and a sense of peace enveloped the land. Victor's curse had been lifted, not by my demise, but by the purity of my intent to save the souls trapped by his deceit. From that day on, the farm truly began to prosper. The eerie atmosphere was replaced by a vibrant energy, and the land flourished. I continued to find traces of my grandfather's efforts to protect the farm, and his spirit seemed to guide me. I live now with a renewed sense of purpose. Each sunset no longer brings dread, but a reminder of the dawn that follows. The shadow of my destiny has transformed into a beacon of hope, and I know that the farm's future is bright. The days pass with a newfound normality, filled with the quiet joy of a life reclaimed. There is no more waiting for the inevitable, only the embrace of a future I now face with confidence and peace. I was never a man of great virtues. I always indulged in vices and decadence. I drank until I lost consciousness, used drugs to escape reality, and my relationships were superficial and destructive. It was during one of those nights of excess that everything changed. I was at rock bottom, hopeless and directionless, when a sinister presence made itself known. It was a figure of common appearance, almost banal, but there was something about him that made my skin crawl. His eyes were cold, empty, but of a depth that seemed to absorb all the light around. He approached me, and with a hypnotic voice made me an offer. "I can transform your life," he said. "Everything you desire can be yours. Money, success, health, happiness. But there's a price." "What is the price?" I asked, curiosity mixed with despair. "You must become a better man. No more using drugs, no more drinking alcohol, no actions that harm yourself or others. You must live in fulfillment, seek virtue and justice. If you fail, your life will be mine." At that moment, the offer seemed like a blessing. I was desperate for a way out, for a change. I agreed without hesitation, and he disappeared as mysteriously as he had appeared. In the days that followed, my life began to change in an impressive way. I got an excellent job, my health improved remarkably, and my social circle began to expand with positive and inspiring people. Everything seemed to finally be in place, but there was a price, and that price began to weigh heavily. The first days of sobriety were torture. My body craved alcohol and drugs. My mind was in constant turmoil. The entity, however, was always present, watching me from the shadows, ensuring I didn't fall back into temptation. One night, the temptation was almost unbearable. I was at a party surrounded by drinks and drugs. Former friends encouraged me, and the pressure was overwhelming. I felt on the verge of collapse when he appeared again, invisible to others, but as clear as day to me. "You know what's at stake," he whispered in my ear. "If you give in, everything you've gained will be lost, and so will you." Trembling with fear and desire, I resisted. I left the party, sweating cold, my heart racing. I realized that this entity was not just a simple devil, but an implacable judge, ensuring that I paid the price for my redemption through the transformation of my own character. Months passed, and I remained steadfast. Each day was a battle, but I began to notice a real change in myself. I felt stronger, more conscious, more responsible. My relationships improved, and I began to find joy in small things I once despised. However, the dark presence never left me. It was a constant reminder that my life hung by a thread, teetering between redemption and damnation. One day, in a moment of weakness, I picked up a bottle of whiskey. I hadn't drunk in almost a year, but at that moment, the despair was stronger. "Don't do it," the voice echoed through the room, icy and cutting. "I just want a moment of peace," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. A moment of relief. "You know the price," he responded, relentless. "Your soul is at stake." With trembling hands, I put the bottle back. I sat on the floor, crying like a child. The entity watched without compassion, merely ensuring that I upheld my part of the agreement. Years passed, and surprisingly, I became a person I never imagined I could be. Sobriety brought clarity, and clarity brought a life full of purpose and meaning. I began to help others who were in the same situation I had been, dedicating myself to charity work and counseling. I discovered a type of happiness I never thought possible. But the dark presence never completely disappeared. Even now, as I write these words, I feel its eyes on me, a constant reminder that my pact still holds. I know that if I fail one day, if I succumb to the darkness, my life will be taken. The entity didn't give me a second chance just to drag me back to hell. It gave me a second chance to become something more, something better. Deep down, I understood that its role was not just of destruction, but of justice. It was an implacable judge, ensuring that I, a lost man, found the path to redemption through sacrifice and constant struggle. And so I live, day by day, remembering that my life depends on my ability to be a better man. Every choice I make is a choice between light and darkness, between life and death. The price of my new life is high, but now I know it is a price worth paying. This is my story, a story of redemption and terror. A story that shows that sometimes the true price of salvation is the transformation of our own soul. I don't know how to begin recounting this story, but it was a night of full moon when, after a long time, I decided I would indeed make the pact. The sky was clear, but the moonlight only made the shadows deeper and more sinister. With the grimoire in hand, I took to the road, heading towards the crossroads, a dirt road deep in the countryside, surrounded by dense thickets far from any civilization. The idea of performing the ritual made me nervous, but the promise of power and riches was irresistible. I had to follow the path to reach the best crossroads, far from any rural house. Finally, I found the crossroads, which was deserted and silent, the kind of silence that makes your ears buzz. I placed the grimoire on the ground and, with trembling hands, drew the circle of invocation according to the book's instructions. I lit the black candles, whose glow seemed to be swallowed by the darkness around. Every step, every movement, was accompanied by the sound of dry leaves and breaking twigs under my feet. I began reciting the words from the grimoire, an ancient and harsh language that made my throat ache as I pronounced it. The night seemed to grow denser, and the air colder with each syllable uttered. The wind ceased to blow, and time seemed to freeze around me. That's when I heard the first sign that something was wrong. A deep growl coming from the shadows around me made me stop. I looked around, but I couldn't see anything beyond the trees. The sound was getting closer, a low, continuous noise that made my skin crawl. I continued the ritual, trying to ignore the growing fear within me. But the growling intensified, accompanying each word I spoke. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness. At first glance, it looked like a dog, but as it approached, I could see that it was something much more terrifying. Its eyes glowed red like embers, and its sharp teeth reflected the moonlight. The creature was huge, with a presence that emanated pure evil. It was only a few meters away from me, and I could feel its hot, fetid breath. I froze in fear, but I continued reciting the words, "Faster now, hoping that the ritual would be my salvation. The creature drew closer still, and I could hear the sound of its claws scratching the earth. I closed my eyes and focused on what I was doing, reciting the last words of the grimoire. Then everything fell silent. I opened my eyes slowly, and the creature had disappeared. The air was quiet again, but the feeling of being watched persisted. I gathered my things and hurried home as fast as I could, feeling the creature's red eyes burning into my back. The following days were strange. At first it seemed like nothing had changed, but then the dreams began. Every night, the entity would appear, an indistinct figure, shrouded in shadows, silently watching me. Its words were a whisper, promises of power and riches, but always with a price. I would wake up sweating, unable to forget those red eyes. It didn't take long for the strange occurrences to intensify. Objects moved on their own in my house. I heard whispers in the dark, felt cold touches on my skin. One night I woke up with scratches all over my body, marks I couldn't explain. The people around me started acting strange, looking at me with fear and suspicion. I realized I had made a terrible mistake, but it was already too late. The entity from my dreams grew more powerful, more present, with each passing night. I was trapped in an endless nightmare, haunted by a choice I should never have made. I am still searching for a way out, a way to break the pact I made at that cursed crossroads. Every day is a battle against the terror that has infiltrated my life. The grimoire, now kept in a locked box, seems to pulse with a dark energy, as if mocking me in my despair. In my quest for a solution, I began visiting occult experts, mediums, and even exorcist priests. No one could offer a concrete answer, only vague and useless advice. Some said I should burn the grimoire, but the fear of unleashing something even more terrible prevented me from following that suggestion. One night, after another disturbing encounter with the entity in my dreams, I decided I needed to take drastic measures. I found a renowned occultist, someone who supposedly had dealt with similar cases before. His name was Mr. Delgado, a man of austere appearance and tired eyes, who welcomed me into his home filled with talismans and protective symbols. Mr. Delgado listened to my story in silence, analyzing every detail with a grave expression. When I finished, he remained silent for a long moment before speaking. "You have involved yourself with forces far beyond human understanding. This kind of pact is rarely undone without severe consequences." He instructed me to perform a banishing ritual, a complex and dangerous process that involved not only destroying the grimoire, but also performing a symbolic sacrifice at the same crossroads where it all began. I hesitated, but I knew I had no other choice. The night of the ritual arrived, and I prepared myself according to Mr. Delgado's instructions. I returned to the crossroads, this time carrying not only the grimoire, but also a ceremonial knife and various ingredients he had specified. The full moon illuminated the path, casting long, distorted shadows around me. I drew the banishment circle, lit the candles, and began reciting the ritual's words, feeling the same heaviness in the air that I had felt the first time. The wind ceased, and time seemed to freeze. Fear returned, more intense than ever. In the midst of the ritual, I heard the familiar growl again. The creature from my nightmares emerged from the darkness, its red eyes glowing with indescribable fury. I felt a chilling cold as it approached, but I continued reciting the words, trying not to succumb to panic. With one final effort, I raised the ceremonial knife and stabbed the grimoire, uttering the last part of the ritual. An explosion of blinding light and a terrifying scream echoed through the crossroads. When the light dissipated, the creature had disappeared, and the grimoire was pierced and seemed to have lost all power, reduced to an old, torn book that I then set on fire and reduced to ashes. I returned home exhausted but relieved. In the following days, the dreams ceased, and the strange phenomena gradually diminished. The feeling of being watched dissipated, and the marks on my body disappeared. I still carry the psychological scars of that experience, but I am finally free from the entity that haunted me. The pact was broken, but not without a price. I learned the hard way that playing with forces beyond our control is a fatal mistake. This is my story, a warning to those who, like me, think they can dabble in the occult without consequences. The price of power is too high, and the repercussions are more terrible than anyone can imagine. May my experience serve as a lesson to all who seek dangerous shortcuts to fulfill their desires.